I was the general's cherished daughter, yet I married the crown prince as his secondary consort. The crown prince and his wife are a devoted couple, while I stand between them like a mere clown. But it matters little. What I ever sought was never to be bound to one man from marriage to old age. Throughout the capital, all knew the crown prince and crown princess had grown up together, bound by deep affection. Yet, after 2 years without an heir, the Empress Dowager intervened. She selected the youngest daughter of the general of the flying cavalry to enter the Eastern Palace, bestowing upon her the title of Consort Liang. On the day of the wedding, my father, feeling he had wronged me, petitioned the emperor for a favor. He was granted a 10-mile-long procession of wedding finery, escorting me in grand ceremony to the Eastern Palace. The crown princess, perhaps sensing my ill intent, paid for my wedding night with a mouthful of fresh heart's blood, a price that left me alone in the bridal chamber, enduring the profound humiliation of an empty bed. Gossiping maids whispered beneath the windows, mocking my miscalculated scheme. They whispered that the crown prince and his consort shared a bond stronger than gold, a union no daughter of a warrior like me could ever hope to disrupt. Bond stronger than gold? If these people knew that this daughter of a soldier was only married to the crown prince through his relentless scheming to secure the Empress Dowager's blessing, they'd likely be stunned enough to swallow their own tongues. But the crown prince's elaborate efforts to bring me into the palace stemmed not from affection for me. It was because my father had recently achieved remarkable military glory on the battlefield, earning the emperor's personal appointment as general of the flying cavalry. With command over vast armies, his influence now dominated the court. The emperor had numerous heirs, and the crown prince, whose position remained precarious, sought additional pillars of support. Following the wedding night, custom dictated that the secondary consorts would present tea to the crown princess the next day. I, however, slept until the third cockcrow before rising leisurely to wash and dress. A palace maid brought a new set of pale pink garments. I lifted the hem to glance at them briefly before instructing Hong Ying to fetch my usual blue dress. The maid hesitated awkwardly. Hong Ying shot her a glare. "What? Do you intend to stay here and assist Lady Liang with her change of clothes?" By the time I finished dressing, the sun was already high in the sky. I casually picked up the new water-red gown, removed the nail polish from my fingers, and then ordered, "Go inform the crown princess that I will present her with tea before lunch." Inside the crown princess's chambers, several elderly maids led by the head matron stood in a line on either side of her main seat, each wearing a dark expression. Ironically, the crown princess herself, surrounded by attendants, appeared the most gracious. A radiant smile graced her face as she motioned for her personal maid to present me with tea. But the matron intervened. "Your Highness, according to protocol, Lady Su Liang should first present the tea and pay her respects." The crown princess, helpless, instructed the maid to bring the tea tray with cups and saucers before me. I ignored her, stepping past the maid toward the crown princess's couch. The head matron reached out to block me. Without looking, I snatched the cup and splashed its contents directly onto her face. The scalding tea made her scream and collapse to the floor. I tossed aside the still-warm teacup and said coldly, "Who gave you the audacity to defy your superiors?" The remaining maids were startled by my actions, and for a moment, none dared to step forward to stop me. Seeing me approach, the crown princess remained as composed as ever, not even losing a trace of her smile. "What are you doing, sister?" I looked down at the dignified, respectful woman before me. True to her upbringing in a 3-generation scholarly family, she was a lady of refinement, a pity she'd learned such vulgar tricks. "Hong Ying." I summoned my personal maid. The young maid swiftly brought over a freshly brewed cup of tea. I picked up the teacup and slowly bent down. "Sister, please." The crown princess hesitated, tentatively reaching out to me while her words slipped out unconsciously. "Sister, from now on." My eyes turned cold, yet my face softened into a faint smile. "Sister, did you sleep well last night?" Before she could answer, I continued, "I heard you coughed all night. You must not be feeling well." The crown princess's expression abruptly changed. My smile deepened as I murmured, "Xiao Qianqian, the shame of our wedding night, thanks to you, it's unforgettable." With that, before she could react, I overturned the teacup, let out a perfunctory ah, and collapsed to the floor. The Crown Prince stood within my bedchamber, watching as a steady stream of restorative tonics was carried into the Eastern Palace. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a faint, ambiguous smile playing on his lips. Everyone knew I'd knocked over the cup myself, the head matron knew, the Crown Princess knew, and even the Crown Prince saw right through my exaggerated, clumsy act. But so what? His Majesty personally inquired about the matter, learning I'd been left alone on my wedding night, then burned my hand for no reason while presenting tea the next day. The Crown Prince was summoned for a full hour of reprimand. As for my lazy and arrogant behavior, it was dismissed as youthful innocence and naivety. The intricate court etiquette requires gradual cultivation. After bandaging my hand, the Crown Prince dismissed the maidservants and stood by my bedside. He did not inquire about my injury but asked instead, "Su Liangdi, do you know what Father Emperor said to me today?" I feigned ignorance and replied that I did not know. Observing my reaction, the Crown Prince suddenly smiled with a hint of amusement. Father Emperor said that as Crown Prince, my foremost duty is to expand the imperial lineage. Li Xing was not the most outstanding among the imperial princes. He was the only son of the late empress, yet not the sole legitimate heir. His late mother's family had declined, far less influential than the current empress's clan, whose princes enjoyed far more solid foundations. Moreover, he had no offspring of his own. For 2 years, he and the Crown Princess had performed the role of a deeply devoted couple, which served as a form of appeasement to Xiao Qianqian's maternal family. The Crown Prince of this reign, constrained by multiple factions to such an extent. My gaze slid down from his sparse, handsome brows to his thin, cool lips. The Crown Prince possessed striking features, no wonder the Crown Princess had merely paid her respects to the Empress Dowager before agreeing to this marriage. Sunlight filtered hazily through the shadowed curtains. I raised my hand, my fingertips resting on the knot of my robe's sash. This humble servant dares not betray His Majesty's imperial grace. But the Crown Prince seized my slender wrist. "I thought you would hate me." Hate? How could I not hate him? Father had promised me, after my coming-of-age ceremony, he would take me back to the frontier. Free from the constraints of the inner chambers, beneath boundless skies and seas, I would have ample time to seek a man I loved, to share life's joys and sorrows together. Yet on the very day of my coming of age, what awaited me was an imperial decree of betrothal. From that day on, I've been trapped within these 4 walls, unable to take a single step beyond them for the rest of my life. The thought that all this was because of the man before me made me so furious I didn't even want to speak to him anymore. Li Xing, however, misunderstood my silence. He seemed to smile. "Don't be afraid. I am not one driven by lust." I lowered my lashes, barely suppressing the urge to roll my eyes. "Take good care of your injury," he said, already rising. Yet his gaze lingered on my bandaged palm. His steps faltered, and he turned back to adjust my robe, carefully readying the sash. With my hands scalded, even if I were merely pretending, I couldn't attend to him for 4 or 5 days. To demonstrate her virtue, the Crown Princess consort came to my chambers punctually each day, bowl of medicine in hand, to report for duty. I suspected she dared not poison me outright, so she schemed to starve me to death instead. I refused to grant her virtue, ordering palace attendants to seal the chamber doors tight. No one would disturb my slumber. After being turned away twice, the Crown Princess had her fill of drama. Later, she sent only maidservants, and finally dispatched a young eunuch. I instructed Hong Ying to open the door, then poured the medicine into the bonsai pot right before the young eunuch's eyes. "Go. Report this truthfully to your Crown Princess." The next evening, rain fell. All the palace gates were shut tight. Feeling stifled indoors, I took advantage of delivering soup to the Crown Prince, bringing Hong Ying along with me as I slipped out of the side hall. The Crown Prince was busy handling state affairs in his study. When I arrived bearing the nourishing tonic, the Crown Princess was already waiting at the doorway. "My dear sister, you've gone to such trouble. The virtuous crown princess, whom I'd humiliated just yesterday, now acted as if she'd lost her memory, addressing me warmly as sister. I sighed inwardly at how exhausting her role must be, clearly seething with hatred for me, yet still forced to greet me with a smile. But even clay figures have their breaking point. True to form, she added, it's unfortunate, sister, but the crown prince caught a slight cold a few days ago. The imperial physician specifically ordered him to avoid such nourishing foods. I raised an eyebrow slightly. In that case, I'll take my leave. Of course I knew the crown prince had caught a cold recently. Even the crown princess standing here ahead of me was thanks to my people rushing to tip her off. I merely needed an excuse to leave. I never intended to actually deliver the warmth to Li Xing's mouth. After all, with my peerless culinary skills, if Li Xing were to choke to death on it, no one would believe I hadn't poisoned him. On the way back, splashing rain soaked my skirt hem. Hong Ying hurriedly wiped it with a handkerchief as I stood still, letting her fuss over me. Out of sheer boredom, I suddenly noticed someone curled up in a corner not far away. In this thunderous downpour, he lay motionless on the ground, like a sick cat. My curiosity piqued. I pushed past Hong Ying's protests, holding my umbrella to get a closer look. It was a young eunuch. He lay curled sideways in the water, soaked through, his clothes torn and tattered. Miss, he's probably a servant who's done something wrong in one of the palaces. He's just waiting to die here. Let's go back. Hong Ying grew anxious when I didn't move. I didn't move only because the little eunuch suddenly struggled and grabbed the hem of my skirt. His grip was weak. Even if I hadn't pulled away, he wouldn't have held on for long. It was the little eunuch the crown princess had sent yesterday to deliver medicine to me. In just one day, he had become like this. Have him dragged to a sheltered spot, I ordered. Then I had a maid bring the restorative soup prepared for the crown prince. Force feed it to him too. Before leaving, I nudged the little eunuch's arm with my toe. If you survive, come to Yushu Hall tomorrow. I want you. After the downpour, the entire Yushu Hall seemed cleansed. Hong Ying had a swing tied to the massive crabapple tree in the courtyard, claiming it was to ease my boredom. I never use such things for amusement, I murmured listlessly, leaning against the beauty couch, with no intention of indulging. Ever since I could remember, father had spent most of his life campaigning abroad. Yet whenever he returned to the capital, he would bring me along. He taught me to ride horses, wield spears, and showed me the vast world beyond the confines of a maiden's chamber. But all that now felt like a dream from the southern branch. Now that the dream had ended, I was still destined to spend my life in this treacherous, confined space. Miss, please just try it. Hong Ying, who had grown up with me, knew my temperament well and simply grabbed my arm. I couldn't resist this girl, so I let her pull and coax me onto the swing. Miss, I'm pushing. Hong Ying wasn't tall, but she had surprising strength. As I sat there, she pushed me higher and higher. Vermilion walls receded rapidly in my vision, while the azure sky stretched boundlessly wide. Swinging so high, I nearly grasped the wind itself. Your Highness! Who? My instinct was to look down, yet my body simultaneously flew backward uncontrollably. Mid-air, before I could react, someone caught me in their arms. We both landed on the ground, though I was well protected. Only a few golden hairpins loosened, tumbling awkwardly into the grass. The person beneath me, however, took the full impact of the fall. His golden robes were now dusted with grass and soil, a touch of noble disarray. It was Li Xing. He must have been hurt by my weight, for his brows furrowed slightly. Startled, I tried to rise, only to find my hairpin tangled in his hair. As I fumbled to untangle it, Li Xing murmured softly, "Does your hand still hurt?" I froze, realizing the cotton bandage on my wrist had slipped off, revealing slender, pale fingers as green as spring bamboo. No trace of the burn remained. TSK. I shot Li Xing a reproachful glare. How was I supposed to keep up the act now? By then, palace maids and eunuchs had already scurried over in alarm to attend to us. No need. I'll untangle it myself. Li Xing refused assistance, carefully working through the strands tangled with the floral hairpin. What was his was mine, and what was mine was his. He worked meticulously, while I stood awkwardly by. I signaled Hong Ying to assist, but the little maid only covered her mouth and giggled. I glared at her, yet the little minx raised her eyebrows at me, pressing her thumbs together in a gesture of mutual agreement. The little brat actually learned to tease me? I choked with anger, but with no other recourse, I simply averted my gaze. Li Xing suddenly recalled something and asked me, "Have you heard a certain poem, Liandi?" I stood there utterly dejected, responding only by instinct. "Which poem does your highness mean?" Li Xing placed the hairpin, its jade bead entwined with my black hair, before me. In a voice only we could hear, he recited, "Tied by marriage vows, we are husband and wife, bound by love without doubt." Li Xing did not linger long. To the outside world, he claimed I had caught a chill from the rain last night. He ordered the Imperial Medical Bureau to prepare a warming decoction and personally fed it to me. I pinched my nose and downed it, bitter enough to send a Buddha to heaven and another to the underworld. Hong Ying brought candied fruit and vividly recounted how the Crown Prince had intercepted the Crown Princess delivering nourishing tonics, then instructed the servants to keep all disturbances away from me. Afterward, she sighed, "Seems the Crown Prince isn't as deeply devoted to the Crown Princess as the rumors claim." I remained lazily sprawled on the bed, not even lifting my eyelids. Where in these palace walls is there room for undying devotion? It's all just you deceiving me deceiving you. But the Crown Prince treats you differently, miss. I chuckled. What is it? Do I have an extra pair of eyes, or an extra mouth? Hong Ying, annoyed by my flippancy, turned away and refused to speak to me. But I was no longer sleepy. I rolled over and clung to her skirt. Do you know what he said to me? He said, "Tied by marriage vows, we'll grow old together." Hong Ying abruptly turned back. I seized the moment to grab a candied fruit from her jar. After popping one into my mouth, I asked, "Guess how many people the Crown Princess said that to?" The Crown Princess must have heard it. Now it's me, and in the future. I chuckled mockingly, there will surely be others. That little eunuch never came after all. Perhaps he'd returned to the Crown Prince's consort's quarters, or maybe he'd perished in that stormy night. The imperial harem was so bored that even the number of goldfish fry in the lotus pond could spark a day-long discussion, while the front court was abuzz with excitement. It all began when Prince Xian's faction accused the left censor of the Board of Censors of dereliction of duty during the morning court session. The charge itself was trivial, merely that Prince Xian had been caught by the chief censor at the back door of a brothel after consorting with courtesans, earning him a stern rebuke from His Majesty. Holding a grudge, he'd seized upon this flimsy excuse to cause trouble. But the chief censor was no pushover. He promptly counter-accused Prince Xian of falsely reporting a court official. The two refused to back down, turning the morning court session into utter chaos. On one side stood his own flesh-and-blood younger brother, the emperor, on the other, a trusted minister he had personally promoted over the years. The younger brother had no desire to inherit this mess, so he delegated authority to the Crown Prince. Consequently, the Crown Prince's eastern palace grew somewhat livelier. Yet even amidst the heavy workload, Li Xing still found time to bring me novelty items unavailable in the palace, sometimes a wooden puppet, other times half a volume of storybooks. Those darn storybooks always ended at the most crucial moments, leaving me unable to eat or drink in peace. They even made my longing for Li Xing's visits grow more fervent. But Li Xing had gone quiet again. Hong Ying paced with me for a long while before finally suggesting, "Why not prepare another bowl of Chinese yam, poria, and squab soup for His Highness the Crown Prince?" Impossible, I refused flatly, though my body betrayed me as I headed toward the small kitchen. After downing 5 bowls of that soup that morning, Li Qing remained utterly unfazed. It was Eunuch One who, fearing I might be accused of plotting against my own husband, secretly slipped me the second half of that storybook. My wish granted, I returned triumphant with Han Ying. On the way back, I noticed the gate to a corner courtyard slightly ajar. Han Ying slipped over for a quick glance, then froze in place. Puzzled, I approached her, but the little maid snapped back to reality. "Miss, don't look. Let's go back." I glanced at her hesitantly, but ultimately couldn't resist peering inside myself. In the desolate little courtyard, a filthy, disheveled little eunuch, covered in blood, was chained to a stone table. It was impossible to tell if he was dead or alive. Though I'd accompanied my father through military camps as a child and wasn't easily startled, this sight still sent a chill down my spine. "Your Highness, forgive this servant's audacity." Suddenly, several young eunuchs rushed forward, flopping to their knees before me. My brows furrowed, but my gaze remained fixed on the courtyard. Han Ying understood my intent and demanded loudly, "Why is he chained here?" The lead eunuch hastily replied, "This worthless slave was babbling nonsense." The crown prince's consort couldn't bear to have him beaten out, yet feared he might harm others. She had no choice but to find rope and bind him. Though I couldn't see his face clearly, I had already guessed the little eunuch's identity. He wasn't dead. But he wasn't truly alive either. They said he was babbling nonsense. What kind of words could he have spoken to be abused into this state? Seeing the displeasure on my face, Han Ying snapped sharply, "Our lady is kind-hearted and cannot bear to see such things. Release him at once." The eunuchs exchanged nervous glances before hastily bowing their heads. Indeed. Such matters should rightly be handled by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince himself. My tone turned icy. Without another glance at the small courtyard, I turned and walked back the way I had come. Only then did the lead eunuch rise, fumbling frantically to retrieve a key and unlock the iron chains. "Your Highness jests. Such a trivial matter would never dare trouble the Crown Prince. My handmaid happens to possess some rudimentary knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine. Take her to Yushu Hall. If she can be healed, it will count as a virtuous deed done for me." After speaking, I looked at Han Ying. "Han Ying?" "Han Ying, to ease the Empress's worries, this servant shall spare no effort." Seeing the eunuch's increasingly panicked expressions, my expression hardened. The Crown Princess is known for her kindness and generosity. By disobeying her orders, are you trying to frame her for mistreating palace servants? Sister? My 5 consecutive bowls of pigeon soup must have disrupted the Crown Princess's plan to add fragrance to the sleeves. Though Xiao Qianqian's face remained serene, her eyes held a chill. I shrugged it off, merely disciplining a few insolent servants. Seeing her own servants kneeling in a line on the floor, Xiao Qianqian glanced up at the corner room and smiled at me. "What offense did they commit to provoke such fierce anger in you, sister?" I raised my eyebrows at her. "Merely a group of petty thieves attempting to tarnish your virtuous and benevolent reputation. If you choose to overlook it, then they have committed no wrong." Xiao Qianqian choked on her words. Her attendant hastily recounted the entire incident. Who would have thought my sister possesses such a rare, compassionate heart? Xiao Qianqian stepped past the kneeling servants pleading for mercy and approached me, gently taking my hand. "Your discipline is justified. These palace attendants truly have the audacity of the devil. Upon my return, I shall punish them severely." I had no desire to continue the superficial sisterly act with her, yet she unexpectedly leaned closer and whispered, "I never imagined you would go to such lengths for a mere palace attendant." I lifted my gaze, meeting hers with cold, unwavering eyes. "If not him, it would have been someone else." I smiled faintly. "If you wish him dead, I shall ensure he lives." The 5th day of the 8th lunar month. No one could have foreseen that the absurd mutual accusations between Prince Xian and the Grand Censor would become the spark that ignited a prairie fire, dragging countless long-buried cases into the light. Though most were dusty, unsolved cases from years past, they still left the Crown Prince overwhelmed and exhausted. For a full fortnight, he hadn't summoned the crown princess consort, nor, of course, had he set foot in my Yushu palace. Idle boredom made me count on my fingers, nearly a month and a half since entering the palace, and I hadn't once succeeded in attending to his bedchamber. The closest intimacy between Li Xing and me had been sharing a piece of osmanthus and poria cake. Standing before the towering floor-to-ceiling bronze mirror, I scrutinized myself from head to toe and asked, "Hong Ying, have I gained weight?" Hong Ying protested, "Impossible. Your Highness possesses innate beauty, your figure more graceful and slender than ever." I pondered for a moment. Then it must be the crown prince who is lacking. Hong Ying's eyes widened in shock. She hastily covered my mouth with her hand. "You mustn't say such things, miss." I clicked my tongue. Since I'm perfectly capable, it must be the crown prince who's lacking. Yushu Palace was chilly at night, yet a firefly appeared only after dark. So after the palace gates closed, I took Hong Ying out to the courtyard to chase the fireflies with a round fan. Hong Ying was agile, wielding her fan with fierce energy. Watching the startled fireflies scatter in all directions, I silently moved to another flower bed. The summer night echoed with the ceaseless chirping of cicadas. By moonlight, I carefully placed my fan over a petunia blossom. Yet the firefly proved utterly defiant. Not only did it escape through the leaves and petals, but it began to dance around me. My temper flared. I chased after it with my fan, only to stumble and fall. Suddenly, a hand firmly grasped mine. I looked up to see a youth of striking beauty, his features like a painting, head slightly bowed. He murmured gently, "The path is slippery in the dark, Your Highness. Please be careful." It was Qing Ying, the young eunuch I'd fought tooth and nail to pull back from the brink of death. In the August heat, I had the kitchen brew a pot of hawthorn and plum soup, chilled it with ice, and added seasonal fresh fruit to drink for refreshment. The crown prince, having heard the news from somewhere, made a special trip over to ask for a favor. One bowl wasn't enough. He then handed the empty bowl back to me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "There's none left." I turned away, handing both small bowls to Qing Ying. The crown prince smiled instead, wrapping an arm around my waist as he sat beside Qing Ying on the couch. "Who's been upsetting you again?" I only gazed at the vivid red nail polish on my fingertips, replying calmly, "Yushu Hall is facing difficulties lately. Ice must be used sparingly, how else would they endure this endless summer?" Li Xing pinched my nose. "So you were waiting here for me? Speak, what reward do you desire?" I nestled into his embrace. This time, I wished to join the hunt at the forest enclosure. No secondary consort had ever accompanied the prince on a forest enclosure hunt before. Leaning against Li Xing's chest, I took my time answering. My fingers idly played with the jade pendant at his waist while I observed Qing Ying, the attendant standing nearby. The young eunuch had fully recovered from his injuries, his frame now as straight as a pine tree. Even standing alone, he was a sight to behold. Pity his station forced him to keep his head bowed, wasting such naturally gifted good looks. Li Xing didn't immediately grant my request, but he didn't outright refuse either. That meant there was hope. I shifted my position, nestling deeper into his embrace, then picked up a chilled sour plum and fed it to him. He lowered his head to take it, his eyebrows crinkling at the sharp tartness. "Do you like such sour things, Yuer?" I nonchalantly pinched another plum and popped it into my mouth. "Is this sour? In my palace, there's something 100 times more sour than these plums." Li Xing looked at me. I remained in my usual limp, boneless manner, leaning against his chest. Li Xing suddenly tightened his embrace. "I shall stay with you tonight." I tilted my head up to meet his gaze. His deep, brooding eyes held more than just a smile, a hint of something else, a warmth that made my heart race and my throat dry. I looked away. "Your Highness has countless matters to attend to daily. I am foolish and clumsy, unlike the crown princess consort who can share your burdens. Truly unwilling to let me stay? My monthly period has begun." I rolled over, resting on Li Xing's lap. But by the time it ends, your highness will have departed. The imperial hunting expedition at the forest reserve was set for 3 days hence. By then, not only ministers but princes and nobles from within and beyond the palace would attend with their families. Yet, save for the emperor, most would bring only their principal consorts. As it happened, I was a secondary consort. A concubine, that is, a royal concubine. Li Xing departed without giving me an answer, but I felt no urgency. I never attended to his bedchamber. Those half-hearted, coy games were crude, yet remarkably effective. Li Xing never called out my little tricks. He delighted in the small efforts I made for him, obliging my every whim with perfect cooperation. His attitude bordered on doting. Were I not born into the imperial family, I might have truly believed his indulgence stemmed from genuine affection for me. The imperial decree permitting my attendance at the forest hunting grounds arrived at Yishu Hall early the next morning. Accompanying it was a set of narrow-sleeved riding attire, red and white, which pleased me greatly. On the day of departure, I left my red tassel behind and instead brought Qingying along. His tall stature made him well suited for leading the horse. The moment we passed through the palace gates, I felt my breathing ease considerably. The crown prince's procession led the way, accompanied by the crown princess. My carriage followed closely behind, small and unassuming, moving at a leisurely pace. After an unknown duration, the chirping of birds and the buzzing of cicadas lulled me into drowsiness. Half asleep on the soft cushions, I drifted into a dream where I became a cloud, drifting freely and gazing down upon the scenic lakes and mountains below. Suddenly, a soft, gentle call scattered my reverie. "Your Highness, we have arrived." My eyes half closed, I felt no urge to move. "Qingying, come in and help me out." Only after a moment did the carriage curtain lift from the outside. Qingying wore a convenient long robe with short sleeves today, his arms secured with leather straps. I placed my hand on his, feeling its slight coolness. He helped me sit up and then assisted me in putting on the veil hat beside me. Through the thin gauze, I smiled and teased him, "Young master, serving me like this, aren't you afraid your little wife might get jealous?" "Your Highness, please don't tease your humble servant." Qingying's hand suddenly lost its grip, loosening one of my beaded hairpins. I giggled out loud, then pulled the pin out, raised an eyebrow, and handed it to him. "It's yours. Go apologize to your young mistress." The imperial forests spanned tens of thousands of acres, though ordinary hunts never ventured too deep. The nobles who dismounted from their carriages were already itching to begin, while the ladies in waiting were settled into tents at the forest's edge to rest. As the crown prince's consort, I was naturally assigned to share quarters with the crown princess. Xiao Qianqian wore a rain-washed sky-blue floral ceremonial gown today, her hair held back only by a smoky jade hairpin. She resembled a lotus blossoming after the rain, radiating a simple, elegant grace. I entered wearing riding boots, just in time to see the princess consort of Rui and Xiao Qianqian seated at the same table, chatting warmly. Prince Rui, the emperor's uncle, had reached the age of understanding heaven's will, yet his second wife, the princess consort of Rui, was a cousin of Xiao Qianqian from the same clan. Noticing my entrance, the princess consort abruptly fell silent and turned her gaze toward me. The clinking of gold and jade adornments echoed around her, a veritable display of opulent wealth. I hastily performed the customary bow, not waiting for her to dictate protocol, and immediately ordered Qingying to fetch the riding attire with arrow sleeves from the carriage. The princess consort of Rui must have been brewing her show of authority for quite some time, only to be interrupted by my unconventional move. With a sarcastic tone, she remarked, "Su Qingyue, now that you are the crown prince's consort, why do you act with less and less decorum?" I sat on the soft cushion, propping my chin on my hand and nodding in deep agreement. "Your Highness speaks wisely. Perhaps you should raise your voice even louder, so His Majesty might hear and judge just how indecent this consort Liang, bestowed by the Empress Dowager herself, truly is." Princess consort Rui froze, then stammered in explanation, "That's not what I meant at all." Xiao Qianqian, however, pressed her hand and smiled at me. "Sister, your presence this year is truly a blessing. In past years, this tent was only mine, cold and lonely. Now with you here, it's so much livelier. Sister, fear not. Each year will only grow livelier. My sincerity was palpable, making Xiao Qianqian grit her teeth in frustration. Yet she maintained her smile, replying, that would be most welcome indeed. With me added to this courtyard tent, it might feel a bit stifling. The princess consort of Rui grew restless and, seizing a flimsy excuse, led the crown princess consort out. Just then, Qingying entered carrying garments. As I stepped into the inner tent, I heard the princess consort of Rui mutter under her breath, that little Mingsu Qingyue has climbed right over your head, and you still act like a saint? Xiao Qianqian abruptly snapped at her, Princess, watch your tongue. I clicked my tongue in disapproval and motioned Qingying to close the door. Both daughters of the Xiao family, no wonder Xiao Qianqian became crown princess while her cousin ended up as the second wife of a widower. Your Highness. Qingying suddenly called softly. My outer skirt was particularly difficult to untie today, and I was growing quite frustrated. I glanced at him impatiently, aren't you going to help? After a moment, a pair of warm hands tentatively rested on the knot at my waist. They fumbled cautiously for a while but found no solution. I tilted my head to look at him. Am I so unsightly that you must grope around like a blind man feeling an elephant? With that, I took his hand and placed it on the tangled knot at my waist. Here. Qingying opened his eyes but kept his head bowed. His movements were meticulous, and soon he had untangled the knot. Simultaneously, my outer skirt fell to the floor. Caught off guard, his fingertips lightly brushed the skin at my waist through the sheer inner robe. I was somewhat surprised. Though his fingers were slender and pale, they weren't as soft as I'd imagined. Instead, they carried a hint of callousness, making me feel slightly ticklish. This servant deserves death. He knelt on the ground, his back, once straight as pine or cypress, suddenly slumping. I didn't like it. I kicked his shoulder with my toe. You're an eunuch. Serving me is your duty. What's there to die for? After changing clothes, a sudden wind swept across the grassy field, scattering the clouds and revealing a vast expanse of azure sky. Endless and boundless. I barely managed to hold down my wildly fluttering cape when I turned and saw a young man in riding gear galloping toward me. His posture was upright, his presence bright and bold. He reined his horse beside me, leaning down with a smile. Little girl, out for some fresh air? My eyes, however, were drawn to the small horse he led by the reins, pure white, not a single stray hair out of place. Why bring the little one today? Where's its father? My second brother dismounted, patting my head as he did so. Your status is different now. When we return to the manor, I'll let you ride Black Wind. Deal. I felt a surge of delight. What about eldest brother? Off to the barracks again? The Chang tribes have been restless lately. His Majesty sent him to investigate. His gaze then fell on Qingying, who stood attending beside me. A new servant bestowed by the crown prince? I shot him a glare and turned to Qingying. Take the horse over there to graze. My second brother whistled. You're quite protective. I was hoping he'd look up and address me properly so I could get a good look. He's just a little palace eunuch. What's there to look at? My second brother raised an eyebrow. I find him rather familiar. He tossed the neatly wrapped bundle from his embrace to me. The illustrated book you asked me to fetch. Holding the book, I beamed with delight. My second brother watched me, arms crossed, a mix of exasperation and affection evident. You never grow up. I pressed down my wind-blown veil and whispered, Second brother, the weather's changing. After the imperial hunt began in the capital's outskirts, the noble participants entered the dense forest with their attendants and hunting dogs. I rode my white mare slowly around the perimeter of the hunting grounds. Few ladies came to ride, and more than half of those who did were there specifically for one girl. She was the emperor's most cherished ninth princess. Though young, the princess possessed a bold and outgoing spirit. Naturally, she refused to stay quietly in the imperial tent during this hunt. Carrying her bow and arrows, she boasted of competing with her royal brothers. I chose not to join the commotion, instead taking Qingying for a leisurely stroll. Suddenly, my second brother burst out from the woods beside me, tossing a fluffy white bundle before me. "Little girl, take this to play with." With that, he spurred his horse back into the woods. I had Qingying turn the white bundle over. To my surprise, it was the prize of this hunt, a snow fox. I examined the fox and ordered, "Qingying, untie its rope." Freed from its bonds, the snow fox cautiously stood up, glanced around, then darted swiftly toward the woods. I drew my bow and fired an arrow, but it only struck the ground near its paw. Startled, the fox changed direction and bolted toward the ninth princess. Sure enough, the next moment brought a cry of delight. Having missed her shot, the ninth princess spurred her horse after the fox into the woods. The ladies-in-waiting surrounding her immediately panicked. "Qingying, stay here." I cracked the reins and followed into the woods. The clatter of hooves grew fainter, fading into a muffled rumble, punctuated only by the occasional whistling of arrows, as if right beside my ear. The sky suddenly darkened. I rode through the forest, cold, damp air filling my lungs with a peculiar suffocating sensation. Yet it also cleared my mind. Before long, my white steed led me to the person I sought. The ninth princess lay fallen beneath a tree. Gone was the defiant arrogance of moments ago. Her jeweled hairpin and locks were tangled, her clothes torn by branches. The pampered little princess was now pale with fright. I untied my cloak and wrapped it around her, soothing her softly, "It's all right, princess. This horse knows the way. It will lead you out." Still trembling, the princess protested, "No, I won't go. I will wait here for the guards to come." "Impossible. The rain will come soon. Head back the way we came, and you'll surely find them." I guided her gaze skyward. The sky had already grown dim, and dark clouds, heavy with storm, were slowly churning in from the distance. I helped the princess mount the horse, then noticed a scrape on her cheek. "Your Highness, you're hurt here?" The princess murmured, "Something came." Startled the horse. "An assassin?" I whispered in alarm. The princess startled too. I knelt to examine the ground and finally found an arrow with its tail feathers cut off. Sighing in relief, I said, "The arrow bears the emblem of the Prince Xian's residence." "It's not an assassin. Prince Xian." The princess, still shaken, wasn't thinking clearly. She gripped the reins of the white mare and asked me belatedly, then, "Sister, what about you?" "Don't worry, princess. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince will definitely send someone to find me." With that, I patted the horse's flank. The white mare understood and galloped toward the forest's edge, carrying the princess away. As the sky darkened further, I scanned the surroundings for shelter from the rain but accidentally stepped on and snapped the broken arrow beneath my feet. I paid it no mind, kicking it aside. It was merely a decayed arrow, how could it bear any markings of the prince's residence? After seeing the princess off, I hurried back along the path, calculating when the crown prince's entourage might realize they'd lost a concubine. But suddenly, the sky turned pitch black. Thunder rumbled closer and closer, its deafening roar sending shivers down my spine. My steps grew frantic. No matter how meticulously I planned, I could never predict the whims of the heavens. After a deep, muffled clap of thunder, the rain finally came down. Desperate for shelter, I heard the steady clatter of hooves drawing nearer. It was Qingying. The young man had found a black stallion from somewhere and tracked me down through the storm-lashed mountains. He yanked me onto the horse, pressing my head against his chest before I could speak. "Your Highness, forgive this servant's audacity." His slightly slender frame shielded me from most of the rain. I leaned quietly against him, almost able to hear the young man's heartbeat. Soon, it carried a hint of unspeakable panic. Head east. There's a stone cave there. It was a place I had scouted long ago. Had the weather not gone awry, I wouldn't have ended up in such a wretched state. Qingying's horsemanship was unskilled, and by the time we reached the cave, we were both soaked through. I shivered uncontrollably from the cold. Qingying, heedless of his own state, gathered dry wood in the cave and lit it with flint to warm me. I squeezed the corner of my clothes, dripping wet enough to form a pool. After a moment's thought, I decisively stripped them off. Qingying seemed startled, hastily turning away. I pulled him closer, only to touch a handful of clammy rainwater. You should take yours off too. I stripped off all my soaked outer garments and draped them over the rocks, warming myself by the fire in just my undershirt. Though still cold, it was far better than shivering in damp clothes. Qingying remained stiffly turned away, refusing to move. Through the firelight, I watched him. His back was unusually straight, his silhouette bathed in moonlight like a solitary pine or cypress standing tall in the forest. Qingying, how old were you when you entered the palace? Your Highness, this servant was castrated at 12 and entered the Eastern Palace. No wonder. I curled my knees closer to the fire and murmured, you're different from the other eunuchs. Qingying didn't answer. After a moment, he whispered softly, Your Majesty misunderstands. We servants are all the same. His voice seemed to drift in and out, while the cold seeped deeper into my bones. The lone fire source offered warmth, drawing me closer and closer without my conscious will. Then, suddenly, I felt myself yanked backward, tumbling into a damp embrace. Only then did I realize I'd nearly become firewood, my hair singed into curls at the tips. But the chill swiftly returned. Cold. Instantly, she regained her composure, her expression becoming prim and proper once more, though her smile was stiff and terrifying. Take good care of yourself, little sister. I hope you deliver this child safely. Xiao Qianqian's fear grew by the day. She began summoning the imperial physicians frequently, seeking remedies to aid her conception, even consuming numerous potent folk concoctions. Her complexion grew increasingly haggard, the dark circles beneath her eyes impossible to conceal even with heavy makeup. As fate would have it, she truly did conceive. The crown prince's consort was with child, great joy filled the eastern palace. Cradling her belly, her smile was gentle yet concealed a sharp edge. Sister, the eldest son will one day call me mother. I turned a deaf ear, merely offering congratulations with a smile. On the eve of the emperor's birthday celebration, I ascended the mountain bearing red tassels to pray for blessings. Just as the 99th eternal lamp was lit, urgent news arrived from below. Prince Xian plotted rebellion. The court and the realm were thrown into turmoil. And the catalyst was none other than the Grand Censor, who harbored a deep-seated grudge against Prince Xian. Who knows what hidden hand stirred the waters, enabling him to unravel the threads and uncover Prince Xian's long-lost young son. They say in the Golden Hall, Prince Xian's unexpectedly rediscovered son stood clad in mourning robes, tears streaming down his face as he pleaded with blood-stained words. Clutching the ironclad evidence of Prince Xian's treasonous dealings with the Chang tribes, he laid bare how the prince colluded with aristocratic clans to plot rebellion. He detailed how the king, despising him for his lowly origins, had repeatedly sought to silence him by murder. Every word laid bare the king's wolfish ambitions. The scene moved listeners to tears and sent shivers down the spines of onlookers. Even the 9th princess now claimed her previous fall from a horse was no accident, but an assassination attempt. King Xian was left speechless, overcome by shock and fury. He could never have imagined that his youthful indiscretions would now become his death sentence. When Red Tassel told me this story, she sighed deeply. Why would Prince Xian, the emperor's own brother and already a man of such exalted status, conspire with enemies to rebel? And then there's that suddenly appeared. Prince Xian's young son. The emperor actually believed it. Yes, why would he? I leaned back lazily on the beauty couch, popping a sour plum into my mouth. Listening to the patter of rain, I drifted into a dream, recalling a night over a month ago. It had rained that day too. I was in the inner chambers of Yushu Palace, dismissing all attendants except Qingying. Candlelight flickered, casting a pale glow on his handsome yet pallid face. My fingertips tapped lightly on the table as I spoke in a weightless tone. I need someone to go before His Majesty and personally accuse Prince Xian of treason. Qingying snapped his head up, terror and shock flashing in his eyes. Why me? His voice rasped. I rose and approached him step by step, lifting his chin with my fingertips to force him to meet my gaze. Prince Xian is notoriously promiscuous. Over a decade ago, he had an affair with a courtesan. Little did he know she became pregnant. Qingying seemed utterly unprepared for this revelation. His pupils contracted sharply, his body trembled violently, and his face instantly turned as pale as paper. I ignored his reaction and continued, because your origins were unsavory, feared to tarnish the royal household's reputation, you were sent to the palace as a child to become a eunuch. He let out a bitter, wretched smile. Your Highness. How did you know? How I know is irrelevant. I withdrew my finger, turned, and stood with my hands behind my back. I only ask you this, are you willing to be a pawn in my hand? The rain suddenly grew heavier. Half asleep, I vaguely saw Hongying hurry over to close the window, muttering complaints under her breath, that good-for-nothing Qingying was sent to buy supplies for Her Highness. A month has passed and he's still nowhere to be seen. What a slowpoke. Though nominally a minor prince, Xian Wang possessed deep-rooted influence. The treason case implicated numerous parties. The crown prince was ordered to investigate thoroughly. By the end, several major noble families were implicated. Particularly the Shao family, as the maternal clan of the crown princess, had colluded most deeply with Prince Xian. The emperor's wrath brought bloodshed. The entire Shao family was imprisoned, their estate confiscated, and their lineage exterminated. A century-old noble house crumbled in an instant. The day the news reached the eastern palace, Xiao Qianqian vomited a mouthful of blood and fainted. When she awoke, she was like a madwoman. Ignoring the palace attendants' attempts to restrain her, she rushed into the crown prince's study with disheveled hair, kneeling and pleading. Li Xing refused to see her. The emperor spared Xiao Qianqian from direct punishment, considering she bore no direct connection to the imperial heir. Yet, with her family destroyed and the stigma of being the daughter of a convicted minister weighing upon her, Xiao Qianqian, bearing only the empty title of crown princess, ultimately perished in the 12th lunar month of that year. She never saw the spring blossoms of the following year, nor did she live to see her young daughter, still in her formative years. At her deathbed, I saw her for the last time. She lay on the birthing bed, utterly alone. The pungent stench of blood filled the air, and the glaring crimson seemed to flow endlessly, soaking through the mattress beneath her. Everyone knew she would not survive. Her child was not yet full term, and she showed signs of hemorrhaging. She was kept alive by a single sip of ginseng broth, a mere formality to preserve the royal family's dignity toward the crown prince's consort. Xiao Qianqian's face was ashen, all strength drained from her. Yet upon seeing me, she strained to look behind me. Crown. Prince. Only I came to see you off, I cut off her thoughts. Hearing this, her unfocused gaze suddenly sharpened. She struggled to grasp my wrist, her nails digging into my flesh. Why? Why the Shao family? Her voice was a threat of breath, as if she were asking me, yet also as if she were addressing the man who had shared her bed for years. I replied coldly and firmly, because your surname is Shao. Her pupils contracted sharply, and she coughed up another mouthful of blood. After a long, stunned silence, she spoke slowly, I harmed father. I harmed the Shao family. The Shao family dared to use a crown princess consort to control the crown prince. You were far too arrogant. What do you know? Xiao Qianqian's eyes blazed crimson. He promised me. One lifetime, one soulmate. He clearly told me. He is the crown prince of this dynasty, the future emperor. I couldn't bear it and cut her off. You actually hoped he had genuine feelings for you? Why did the Xiao family arrange for such a daughter to marry into the Eastern Palace? Xiao Qianqian twisted her lips. How could you possibly understand? The crown prince treasures you like a precious jewel now. How could you possibly understand? Of course I don't need to understand. I fearlessly wrenched her hand away. I am not like you. I don't love Li Sheng, nor do I seek anyone's love. Finally, her hand fell limp, her eyes remaining open until death. Xiao Qianqian bled to death, taking 2 lives with her. His Majesty decreed a hasty burial with the rites of a commoner. The Xiao family vanished without a trace. The Eastern Palace stood empty, devoid of a crown princess. Carrying the imperial heir, born into a distinguished lineage and praised for my gentle disposition and exceptional virtue, I was personally recommended by the crown prince to His Majesty. I was thus appointed as the new crown princess. On the day I moved into the main hall of the Eastern Palace, palace attendants knelt before me. Li Sheng took my hand as we walked along the Vermilion Palace path, whispering, "You err, now no one can stand in our way." I lowered my eyes obediently, hiding the mockery in my gaze. Indeed, no one could stand in our way. So, who would be next? The Su family? Or me? The youngest son of the Prince of Xian, honored for his righteous act of sacrificing Qin, gained the emperor's profound esteem. He was exceptionally granted the title of crown prince, becoming the most celebrated figure overnight. Yushu Hall lost a young eunuch named Qingying, yet I gained a crucial hidden pawn. After becoming crown princess, my authority grew ever heavier. I secretly reorganized the Eastern Palace's factions, uprooting the remnants of the Xiao family. Li Sheng seemed pleased to see me wielding power, even delegating some palace affairs to my management. He grew increasingly tender and considerate toward me, appearing truly like a devoted husband. Yet, the military authority held by my maternal clan at the frontier began facing covert checks. Under the pretext of rest and recuperation, His Majesty gradually reduced military rations and dispatched civil officials to oversee the troops. Li Sheng would often casually remark, "General Su has served with such dedication and merit, it's time he enjoyed some well-deserved rest." I stroked my growing belly, smiling with the utmost grace and humility. "Your Highness speaks wisely." Father writes often, saying he longs to hold his grandchild close. Yet my heart grew icy cold. Birds are hunted until they are exhausted, then their nests discarded, rabbits are killed once they have served their purpose. Such has always been the royal way. That winter, when I bore the imperial first grandson, the old emperor's health finally collapsed. After months of lingering on his sickbed, no medicine could save him. As death approached, he summoned the crown prince and me to his bedside. His cloudy gaze lingered on my face for a long time before he rasped hoarsely, "Su. Wise and virtuous. I entrust the crown prince and this empire to you." I bowed my head, my voice choked with emotion. "Your servant dares not betray the emperor's trust, even at the cost of 10,000 deaths." He turned with great effort to the crown prince, "Shinger. Guard against impatience and practice restraint. Treat Su well." His words cut short as he breathed his last. The entire nation mourned. Crown Prince Li Sheng ascended the throne without incident, becoming the new emperor. As crown princess, I was naturally crowned empress, residing in the Jiaofeng Palace to serve as the mother of the realm. The new emperor's accession appeared calm on the surface, yet turbulent currents swirled beneath. Li Sheng was no longer the crown prince reliant on aristocratic military power. He was now the sovereign of the realm. He began vigorously promoting commoners, dismantling the influence of my father's former military faction. He even began to harbor apprehension toward me. During a palace banquet, under the influence of wine, his fingertip traced my cheek. His tone was gentle yet icy. "Moon, now that you are empress, are you accustomed to residing in the Jiaofeng Hall?" I smiled as I poured him wine. "Your Majesty jests. Under heaven, all is the king's domain. Where would this humble servant not feel at home? He stared at me, then suddenly said, "At court today, I issued an edict enfeoffing the crown prince of Xian as Prince of Nan." I had naturally already learned of Qingying's enfeoffment. Li Xing shifted his tone, sighing as if in jest, "Those stubborn tongues in the court." It seemed as though if I hadn't granted the title, they'd blame me for being too righteous in punishing my own kin. I flattered him, "Your Majesty rewards merit and punishes wrongdoing with clarity. You are a rare benevolent ruler." Yet this good brother of mine has been submitting frequent memorials lately, discussing northern frontier defenses. Your elder brother also seems to be demanding military provisions. Does the Empress think their reach has grown too long? My heart sank, but my expression remained composed. The Su family and the prince serve the nation with unwavering loyalty. Your Majesty worries needlessly. It is the restless Chang tribes in the northern frontier that warrant increased vigilance. I knew then, his resolve to eliminate them had hardened. For Qingying, for the Su family, and even for me. What he craved was a realm entirely under his grasp, and an empress who was docile, obedient, and free from the threat of powerful in-laws. Li Xing's actions proved swifter than I had anticipated. He began summoning my son frequently while growing increasingly distant from me. Whispers circulated in the palace that His Majesty intended to depose the Empress and install another. At the mid-autumn palace banquet, amidst revelry and song, after 3 rounds of wine, Li Xing suddenly raised his cup, gesturing toward me and Qingying, "Empress, I offer you a toast. Without the Su family, I would not stand where I am today." His smile was gentle, yet his gaze was as cold as a blade, "Especially you, Empress. You have devoted your utmost efforts to me, even removing many troublesome individuals on my behalf." The entire hall fell instantly silent. My fingers tightened around the wine cup until they turned slightly white. Beneath the table, Qingying's hand pressed down on the concealed hilt of his sword. Li Xing continued with a smile, "But this empire, ultimately, is mine. Empress, would you not agree?" He was forcing me to declare my stance, compelling the Su family to relinquish power, and pressuring Prince Rui to petition for the reduction of his fiefdom. I rose slowly, raising my cup. "Your Majesty speaks truly. This realm is, of course, yours." I drained the wine in one gulp, turning the empty cup toward him with a faint smile. "Just as this cup of poison wine, bestowed by your Majesty, this servant dares not refuse." Everyone's faces paled. Li Xing leapt to his feet. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Clutching my abdomen, I staggered back, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. "Your Majesty." "Why?" Li Xing was both shocked and furious. Chaos erupted instantly. Qingying drew his sword and shielded me, glaring at Li Xing. "Your Majesty, the Empress has been your devoted spouse. How could you commit such a heinous act?" "Guards! The Prince of Nan intends to rebel. Execute him on the spot." Li Xing roared, and guards surged forward. At that very moment, deafening battle cries erupted outside the hall. The imperial capital garrison, led by my father's former commanders, had somehow encircled the palace. "Purge the court of traitors! Slay the tyrant!" Their cries shook the heavens. A meticulously planned palace coup erupted suddenly amidst the clinking of wine cups. Chaos raged through the night. Trapped in the throne hall, Li Xing stared at me in disbelief. "You planned this all along?" I wiped the blood from my lips and met his gaze coldly. "Your Majesty, you forced my hand." "Why?" "I have treated you well." "Treated me well?" I chuckled softly. "Your Majesty, from the day you married me for military power, our relationship has been nothing but a game of scheming. Now you seek to destroy the Su family, harm Qingying, and take my son. How could I sit idly by and wait for my doom?" By dawn, the resistance was quelled. Li Xing was deposed and confined to the cold palace. To the outside world, it was announced that he had suddenly fallen ill and abdicated in favor of the crown prince. My son, the 3-year-old imperial prince, ascended the throne as emperor. I, Su Qingyue, was honored as Empress Dowager. I ruled from behind the curtain, exercising imperial authority. With the young emperor, I, as Empress Dowager, controlled the court. The Su family reached the zenith of its power. Meanwhile, the Prince of Nan, serving as regent prince, devoted himself to assisting and balancing the forces. Another year had passed before I met Qingying privately once more. He came in the dead of night, clad in black brocade robes, knocking at the palace gates. Tall and graceful, he was no longer the timid little eunuch from Yushu Hall who dared not meet anyone's gaze. After discussing matters of state, the palace attendants withdrew, yet he remained standing in the hall. His shadow stretched long beneath the candlelight, revealing a hint of loneliness. He did not speak, yet I knew what he wished to say. His identity. His past. His incompleteness. All his hidden secrets hung like a blade poised to pierce, suspended over the heads of everyone present. If he remained in this realm of intrigue, the tongues of the future would become daggers thrust at him. Neither he nor I could eliminate every witness. Your Majesty, his voice was low, tinged with an almost imperceptible hoarseness, the northern frontier is unstable. Only a prince of royal blood can secure its defense. This servant requests permission to remain permanently at the border. Without an imperial decree, I shall never return to the capital. My hand holding the brush faltered slightly. Ink dripped, spreading a small stain across the memorial. The chamber fell deathly silent, broken only by the crackling of candles. I lifted my gaze, my eyes skimming over his tightly pressed lips and lowered lashes. Granted. A single word, heavy as 1,000 pounds. Hearing this, he bowed deeply, his forehead touching the cold floor tiles, performing a formal yet distant ritual. This servant thanks Her Majesty the Empress Dowager for her grace. From beginning to end, he never once looked up at me. On the day of his departure, a bitter cold wind blew. Dressed in his jet-black crown prince's ceremonial robes, he performed the prescribed bow outside the palace gates, his voice steady and unruffled. Your servant, Qingying, takes his leave of Her Majesty the Empress Dowager. May Her Majesty enjoy robust health and blessings for 10,000 years. May His Majesty's realm endure eternally, with the nation prosperous and its people at peace. I stood atop the lofty palace walls, my imperial robe flowing, veiled by layers of pearl curtains. The wind whipped his wide sleeves, making them flutter and rustle. His figure stood straight as a pine, yet radiated an endless sense of isolation. Your request is granted. My voice passed through the beaded curtains, cold and steady, devoid of emotion. Hearing this, he bowed deeply once more. He rose, turned, and departed. Without the slightest hesitation or lingering, as if merely completing a routine farewell. Until his figure vanished entirely at the palace gates, I did not move. In this life, there are too many gains and losses. Only by standing at the pinnacle of power could I provide Qingying a place to call home. My fingers clenched the railing, numb with bone-chilling cold. Years later, the emperor assumed personal rule, and the realm enjoyed peace and prosperity. A courier from the northern frontier brought news of Qingying's death. It was said he never married, keeping only a few old servants by his side as he gazed silently at the southern night sky. Before his death, he distributed all his possessions among his soldiers. Only one locked iron box remained, with instructions to deliver it to the capital and present it personally to the Empress Dowager. The box arrived at the palace, bearing no name or note. The lock was rusted shut, so I ordered it pried open. Inside lay no rare treasures, only a dull-colored hairpin entwined with withered blue silk threads, and a small scroll of parchment carefully wrapped in oilcloth. Unfolding the parchment revealed meticulously neat yet slightly stiff handwriting, transcribing a frontier poem. Only in the far corner at the bottom was a line of ink dots so small they were nearly invisible. Upon close scrutiny, 4 characters could be discerned: Ji, by Gong. I closed the iron box, my fingertips icy. Outside the window, spring's crabapple blossoms were in full bloom, petals drifting down in a flurry. Between us, love was never spoken, nor boundaries ever crossed. Until his dying breath, he remained subject, concluding with respect. He forever buried those turbulent, hidden emotions beneath the rituals of sovereign and subject, master and servant, silent for a lifetime. I was once a general's cherished daughter, the crown prince's secondary consort, the empress, and ultimately became the all-powerful empress dowager. I gained all the rivers and mountains, yet lost the world beyond the palace walls, along with that profound affection, unspoken until death. The phoenix dwells only on the Polonia tree. This 9-tiered palace is my Polonia, my eternal solitary fortress. The end.